Honored this afternoon to have Dr. Diana Whitney here from the Corporation for Positive Change. This afternoon, as you can see, she's doing the power of appreciative leadership. Dr. Whitney is the author or editor of over 15 books and multiple articles and chapters. She is the founder of the Taos Institute, which, if you look, is not in New Mexico. It's not a place, it's a group. You have to dig into her website to discover that, though. She is also the fellow of the World Business Academy, distinguished consulting faculty at Saybrook Graduate School. Her work addressing some of the most important social issues of our time has been applied by multiple governments, agencies, and businesses over the last 30 years of her work. And recently, you can buy this book in the bookstore. It's Appreciative Leadership. She's going to be signing it today after she's done, outside at the bookstore. Is that right?
Or maybe, I don't know where.
Let's do it at the bookstore.
Okay, at the bookstore.
Let's do it at the bookstore. So you can all see this. This is the one you're looking for. There's a half a dozen of her other books there if you want to have a look. And please join me in welcoming Dr. Diana Whitney.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Isn't this a great time for a speech? After lunch on a rainy Saturday? I mean, we wouldn't rather be doing anything else, would we? I'm going to put this next slide up. How many of you here have gotten the social media bug? A few of you, all right. Well, there's the hashtag for the conference. There's another hashtag for appreciative leadership. If you're the type that wants to let people know where you are and what you're doing, there's some places that you can spread the word. I went to a conference a couple of months ago on social media, and at the end of the first day, I had a headache like I've never had. And at the end of the second day, I went, okay, I'm going to learn this. I know I can learn this. So I got excited about it. I want to talk today about appreciative leadership. At least that's what where is Paul? Paul asked me to talk about. So, we all do what Paul asks us to do, at least while we're here at this conference. And then I'm going to be doing a workshop later on today on appreciative inquiry. And I want to begin by giving you a bit of what is the context for all of leadership today, for all of the work that we're doing. In many ways, we could think about that. There are certain organizational realities, and I'm sure each one of you has your story about the context of life in organizations and communities. But part of our story is clearly globalization and diversity. And there is no place that you go in the world today that is not touched by diversity. The population may be different. The issues of diversity may be different. They may be ethnicities and racial differences. They may be age differences. They may be religious differences and spiritual preferences. But diversity is now the norm. And most of the leadership practices that are still prevalent in organizations do not account for diversity. Invention and reinvention of structure. Certainly in the United States, we are redesigning our healthcare systems. We're trying to redesign our economic systems, by the way, in relation to the economies of the rest of the world. We're now going to look at our educational system. We are at a time right now where the structures and systems that have enabled us to provide services, to provide products, are no longer working. And new ones are being created to do new things, but the old ones are needing to be reinvented. And so those of us who grew up thinking, go to work, have a job, and just do whatever, we're now finding ourselves being faced with go to work and create the organization that we're now going to be part of. And so there's a real call for knowing how to design and redesign and doing it with the people who are engaged. And sustainability is essential. Whether we talk about that as environmental sustainability, whether we talk about that as building peaceful communities and organizations, we all have to be paying attention to what is it that nurtures life and sustains life on this planet, and probably beyond that. And so that's one set of context. Another one for me is appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry came out of the work at Case Western Reserve University in the early 1980s. And I'll talk to you about what it is. But it has become incredibly successful, even though some of you in this room don't know a thing about it. How many of you don't know anything other than the words Appreciative Inquiry? How many of you read a book or an article or took a workshop? And how many of you been doing experiments and practicing Appreciative Inquiry? Good. Hold your hands up. So see those folks? I'm not the only one here knows about Appreciative Inquiry. Tap into them. They can give you good ideas and good advice. So Appreciative Inquiry is a very different philosophy of human organizing and change. And I'll talk about that. It is a very successful process for large-scale change. This room full of maybe 200 people is a small group for me. When we are working with organizations, we are being asked, like Tom White, the president of GTE, said, how do we engage 67,000 people? Now that's kind of interesting, isn't it? So, and I'll talk more about that when I do the Appreciative Inquiry workshop. And what I'm going to share with you in a little bit is some unique leadership capabilities or qualities that we have noticed over the years of practicing Appreciative Inquiry, because it's, the authoritarian hierarchy kinds of leaders, they don't generally find themselves drawn to Appreciative Inquiry. There's a different kind of leader who is emerging, who's looking for tools and techniques and processes that are more congruent with their values. And those are the kinds of leaders who choose Appreciative Inquiry. But we also, those of us whose work is Appreciative Inquiry, are part of this other thing that has been called a positive revolution. And many of you in this room know about positive organizational scholarship. The strengths movement, I don't know a better way to call it other than a movement, because it is growing now around the world. And positive psychology. You can also add into that the positive deviancy. I like to even talk about Matthew Fox's work in spirituality. There's kind of a positive spirituality, original blessing. So we can look in a number of different arenas of life and say, something's going on that we might call a positive revolution. And so with all of that as the backdrop, we sort of enter the realm of appreciative leadership. And what I want to do before talking about leadership is to give you just a little bit of a sense of Appreciative Inquiry. First, indeed, it's a philosophy of human change and human organizing. It is also a process, a very specific process that can engage hundreds and thousands of people. And more recently, as it has evolved and grown, it is becoming a set of practices. My elevator talk, my definition of Appreciative Inquiry is the study of what gives life to human systems, people, teams, relationships, organizations, communities, when they are at their best. The study of what gives life, what energizes us, what gives our vitality, we might call that positive. But with Appreciative Inquiry, we kind of focus on the life-giving forces. And that's what we mean when we're talking about positive and we're talking about appreciative. Appreciative Inquiry does not claim or even attempt to say the world is always at its best. My world is not the way I wish it would be. Right? The world has got some pretty funky things going on, right? So Appreciative Inquiry doesn't make a judgment. It doesn't say, oh, the world is always great. What it does say, and it provides now years of experience and evidence, that when we focus on what works, when we focus on what gives life to people, when we focus on who we are at our best, then we can learn, we can grow, we change, and we move in that direction and get the results we want. What Appreciative Inquiry if anything, as a sort of maybe political statement, it says, we have been looking and studying the wrong things for a long time. Right? We've been studying illness. We've been studying problems. We've been studying what's wrong with humanity, when in fact what we want is to build flourishing organizations, organizations full of meaning, to build relationships that nurture people. and bring out our best. And that we're now at a point where we can no longer get there by studying all the problems. This is the process that we use, and it's called the 4D model. Appreciative inquiry, and you'll notice the yellow box. If there is anything important, the most important thing often in my mind is that yellow box. Appreciative inquiry is not just about, well, tell me what makes you happy, or tell me when you're at your best. Appreciative inquiry starts with a strategic focus, something that you want more of in your organization, your community, the group of people that you're working with. So it takes thought to say, what do we want more of? Is the gentleman, Alan, here, who did the talk yesterday on harm reduction? Alan, okay. So I sat in on a couple of the talks yesterday. Alan's was powerful for me because he's not looking at so much how do you help people in their most problem area, but how do we help them learn to prevent harm? Well, appreciative inquiry would say that's the strategic focus. We're studying something that we want, but I began to wonder from an appreciative inquiry perspective, what would happen if we studied healthy drinking on campuses? Could we even make that phrase, healthy drinking, meaningful? Could we begin to encourage young people to do inquiry into and with people that they know who have a drink in a healthy way? And all that information that's provided, Alan and his team, would be continue to be so valuable. So we start with what is the focus? And we say, it takes time. You all know reframing as a tool. How many of you are good at reframing? Yeah, it's one of the really essential tools or skills. To call it a tool might be too narrow, but it's an important capacity. Well, we need to do that organizationally. We've got to find those ideas that will take us in the direction we want. Then we engage people in discovery, studying that particular topic, that focus when we're at our best. So if we want more enlightened teamwork, we study enlightened teamwork. And then we envision an organization that is filled with the same topic. And then we design an organization that operates on that topic as an essential organizing principle. And then we move into self-organizing in teams, and we call it destiny. So what happens with appreciative inquiry is hundreds and thousands of people are engaged in discovery. There's a book out there called The Power of Appreciative Inquiry, and it tells the story of Hunter Douglas Window Fashions Division. And in the first wave, there were 900 employees who were engaged in interviews. Imagine within a 2-month period, 900 people being able to ask, when you've been at your best in this organization, what's it been? Tell me about it. What's your dream for the organization? So discovery is a time of collecting stories, sharing best practices, and really making meaning about the organization at its best. Then we envision the future. And the dream phase in so many practices comes first. Many of us start with, well, we have to vision the future before we know what to do. But what we have found with appreciative inquiry is when you start with discovery, the dreams are richer. And then we move on to design, because once we have liberated the energy, the enthusiasm, the stories, the dreams of people, the structures of organizations as we know them just simply don't work. Because the old organizations are designed for command and control. And what they're designed to command and what they're designed to control is humanity and human creativity. They're designed to reduce variance, to control variance, and the variance they're trying to control is human difference and human creativity. So now the question is, what kind of organizations might we design? So there's just a little quick example here in nursing. We've done a lot of work around the question of nursing turnover. That is the issue that presents itself. Turnover is so high, it's so costly. But what do we really want? we want nursing retention. We want nurses who stay. In fact, one organization went so far as to say what we really want is a magnetic work environment. It wasn't even about the nurses. It was about the kind of organization that magnetically attracted people. But study of nursing retention, some of the things they chose to study, and they did discovery. The call to nursing. When nurses who've been working for 10, 20, 30 years are invited to remember, what was it that called you to this work? Why did you choose this work? They come to life and they get reconnected with their essential purpose in life. Why nurses stay? You know, most organizations forget to ask that question. They ask the people who've left why you left, but they don't ask those who are still here. Why are you here? What gets you here every day? What most excites you about coming to work here? And this was one of my favorite ones. One group studied humor, the other vital sign. Because in nursing, it's important. That's an important element. And then they dreamed a hospital with magnetic attraction to nurses. And they began to imagine everything from the way nurses were recruited to the way they're onboarding a simulation process, the way their scheduling occurred, the way they had mentoring and peer collegial support. And then they began to design the systems. And you know, when they get to the design phase, you know the systems they most care about? Reward and recognition. Not even compensation. But if somebody would only tell me how great a job we're doing. If we could only take a breath once in a while and celebrate, it would mean a lot. If I could only have time to talk to people and learn what they're doing that's similar to what I'm doing, that would go a long way. And then this is in one case, some of the results, a 13% reduction in turnover and a 20% increase in patient satisfaction with nursing. And it goes on. So that's a little bit about appreciative inquiry. We're going to put a pause there. And those of you who want to join me in the workshop, whenever that is and wherever that is, we'll pick up there. Here are the things that we learned about leaders, successful or leaders of successful appreciative inquiry initiatives. 4 things kept coming up over and over again. And the first was they engage with, and I want to really emphasize the word with, other members of the organization to co-create the future. They will sit at a table like you are sitting in the round, because most of our work is in large rooms with round tables. The CEO, the chief financial officer, the chief R&D director, everybody is in the room participating with people. Bishop Bill Swing, who's the founder of a global interfaith organization that we helped to design using appreciative inquiry, says, you know, everybody says I'm the founder. He said, I'm not a founder, I'm a finder. He said, I sit down and I talk to people and I find people who care about the same things. And then I connect them with each other. And together we're making a difference. And so the U.S. Navy has done a whole series of appreciative inquiry summits. The admirals, not only did they participate for the full 2 days at a table, but they participated without uniforms. Because that was the only way we could begin to level the conversation so that people would not be yes sir, yes ma'am all the time. The second thing, and this was one that was kind of fun because we didn't imagine this at all, but they enjoyed learning and changing. Rick Pellet, who's the general manager of Hunter Douglas, said after a while, he said, you know, I really did think that we'd use appreciative inquiry and a lot of people in the organization would learn and it would be good for them. He said, but I didn't know how much I would learn and how much better a person I would be for it. He said, it's been fantastic. And so that willingness to learn and change. The third is that they care about people. Over and over again, we have the good fortune to work with executives who have this interesting orientation, and they say, well, yes, we make window curtains, but we really develop people, and window curtains are our means to do that. We work in Head Start programs, and we help to make sure there's educational services for young people, but we really are concerned about the well-being and the development of everyone who's working in these organizations, because we're in the business of helping people be the best they can. And the fourth is that they believe in the power of the positive. Over and over again, people come and they say, I have been in marketing in my career, and when you go out to sell something, marketing and sales, you can't sell what's wrong with your product. I don't understand what's so new about this positive thing. Selling, we've been doing it all along. And they'll recognize that the best way to get things done in their sector, in their industry, is by looking at what works. And so we had those things in our mind. We then did some focus groups, and we just asked people. We decided we weren't going to write a book that really told the story of all the big name leaders. We wanted a book that had the voice of the people in it. And so we did focus groups with folks, and we said to them, what's great leadership? And over again, they said great leadership is positive. It's affirmative. It's an attitude. They use the phrase, a positive can-do attitude. Great leadership shows up, gives hope, is positive, is enthusiastic. Positive ways of working. Great leadership really is about collaboration and teamwork and getting along with people. It's not great leadership if the leaders are in conflict with each other. Great leadership, recognition for me of who I am. Great leadership kind of sees me, knows what my strengths are. Sometimes people even talk about the really good leaders that I've known. They believe more in me than I believe in myself. They help bring me to be my best. They recognize who I can be, and they help me be that. They appreciate me. They appreciate us. And positive impact. So this notion of positive has so many different meanings and so much potential. And so we played around, and, as things go, it took us a long time. I think we wrote the book before we defined appreciative leadership. No, I didn't just say that, did I? So appreciative leadership, the relational capacity to mobilize potential and turn it into positive power. To set in motion positive ripples of confidence, energy, enthusiasm, and performance to make a positive difference in the world. So the very first thing I want you to pay attention to about this definition is that leadership is a relational capacity. I'm not talking about the skills of a person. I am not talking about the traits of the next generation of heroes, whoever they are. I'm talking about something that happens when people get together and the quality of their communication is such that they feel good, their strengths are brought out, and the results that they get really are satisfying and make a positive difference. So in many ways, leadership is about the nature of communication. And what we've written is that there's 5 qualities. We call them strategies, but there's 5 qualities. Appreciative leadership is about inquiry. It's about asking questions that are going to make a difference, that are categorically different kinds of questions. They're appreciative, they're value-based, they're affirmative. It's about inclusion or inclusivity. Really, not just because it's the good thing to do or it's some policy, but because we understand that the more diverse the room full of people, the richer the conversations. Illumination, being able to bring out the best of people, to shine the light on strengths and positive emotions. Inspiration, the capacity to give hope. And integrity, which we define as making decisions for the good of the whole. So I'm going to talk about each of these a bit with an emphasis on inquiry and a bit of strengths. So let me first talk about the wisdom of inquiry. I just had to find a place to use this picture. Everybody says, where's the beef? And I think the beef is in the question. I just think it's so tacky it had to be used. Why is inquiry important? Because human systems move in the direction of what they study. Do you want to add something? It's about possibilities, that's right. Again, in some ways, It's common sense. We learn, we grow based on what we study. And yet, we so often don't ask questions about what it is we really want to know. We say that inquiry is the intervention, that human systems move in the direction of what they study. The questions we ask are fateful. They determine what we find, but moreover, they create the world as we know it. Now, let me give you an example. Imagine that I'm curious about stress in the workplace. Tell me your name. Donna. Okay, so I'm curious about stress in the workplace, and I'm going to do some research, and I've got a lot of people signed up. I'm going to interview them all, and I'm having my interview with Donna, and I asked Donna, you've been working here for quite a while. Will you recall a time when you experienced stress in the workplace? Just think about, all the times that you've had stress, and just tell me about one of those times. Right? And Donna starts thinking. You're probably all thinking about some stress. Who or what caused it? How did it affect you? How did it affect the quality of your work, your relationships, your health? All right? That's a series of questions. Now, what is Donna thinking about right now? Stress. She's remembering those. I've asked her to, so she's doing that. But how do you imagine she's feeling? Right? Is that a neutral question? I don't know, maybe. Most of us as researchers think we're asking neutral questions. My neutral question influenced how Donna's thinking, what she's remembering, the story she's thinking about. I influenced her physiology. She's feeling that stress. But you see, it doesn't stop there. Because Donna goes out and she has a cup of coffee. And around the coffee pot, she runs into Alex. And she says, Alex, have you been interviewed yet? And Alex goes, no, not yet, but I'm signed up for tomorrow. And she said, well, wait till you get interviewed. She said, a lot of things. She just asked some simple questions about stress, but it made me think of, 2, 3, 4 years back. She said, I realize there is so much stress in this organization. I don't even know why I'm still working here. All right? So is that uncommon? My question influences Donna's thinking, how she's feeling, and what we call the inner dialogue of the organization, what people are talking about informally. Now, what if instead I asked a question about joyful productivity? The first thing Donna might do is kind of giggle. Joyful productivity? Nobody's asked me about joyful productivity. And I'd say, tell me about a time when you experienced it. Who else was involved? What made it fun and productive? Because isn't that what we want? We want fun and productivity, or meaningful and productive. I can add any good juicy words in there if they're the things I want more of. And how might you have more of this at work? So now I've got Donna thinking, wow, kind of interesting question. And she's got a story. It might have been the time that they pulled the all-nighter to get a proposal ready. It might have been the time she had a family in therapy, and actually they've been to several therapists and nobody could help them, and she did. She helped them. It was hard work, but they got better. And then, of course, she goes out and runs into Alex. And she says, Alex, they're doing this study on joyful productivity. I hadn't ever thought about that. I'd never put those two words together. But when I do, I realize we've got a lot going on around here. It's kind of an interesting lens. Right? So the questions we ask create ripples of meaning. They influence what people remember, how people feel, what they talk about, and they influence the inner dialogue of the organization. Now, that's not only the questions I ask as a researcher. They're the questions you ask as a manager, a supervisor, a therapist, a colleague, a friend. All of our questions have that kind of ripple effect. It's important that we pay attention to the nature of our questions. So appreciative leadership, one of the practices is asking positively powerful questions. Here's another great story. It was actually up in sort of your part of the world. I was actually in Calgary working with a health services group, and one of the people in the room said, you know, I went up north a bit to meet with one of the communities, and I was going to give a talk on what services we have for the community. And it's a community that I knew was in a lot of conflict. I got picked up at the airport when I arrived by an elder of the First Nations community. Now, he was someone who was highly revered, and I was honored that he picked me up at the airport. And as we're driving from the airport to my hotel, he's pointing out different sights for me to see. And I noticed that we're driving along a river. And I said to him, tell me about the river that connects you. And he says, no, you mean the river that divides us. And she said, no, I mean the river that connects you. And he got very quiet. The rest of the car ride to her hotel was silent. He said goodnight, he was polite, and she shows up the next day in the hotel where she was going, or in the meeting room where she was going to speak. And he came up to her because he was not the one that was meant to introduce her. And he said, I've asked if I can introduce you today. Now, she's just a little bit nervous. What is he going to say? And he gets up and he said, I want to tell you that we are about to hear from one of the wisest women I have met. As we were driving last night from the airport, she asked me about the river that connects us. And I argued with her. I told her, no, the river divides us. Because that's the story we have told each other all these years, that the river divides us. He said, I would like us to take her wisdom and begin today in this meeting to create the story of the river that connects us. Because that's the only way we will be able to provide services for all of the children, for all of the next generations. The power of a question to make a difference that ripples out and out and out. And by the way, most of the time you will not know the ripples that you are creating. Because most of the time we don't know that we're already creating ripples. We are already creating ripples. So are you creating ripples that are caring and life-affirming and loving? And are you creating the ripples that are the ripples of what you want the world to be like? Or are you just sort of unconsciously setting meaning in motion? One of the things that we can do is to be conscious about the nature of our questions. The second appreciative leadership strategy is inclusion. And the why is this important is because people commit to what they help create. People commit to what they help create. We've got organization after organization, community after community, and people are not engaged, people don't care. Well, yeah, they don't care about what you want them to do, but if you ask them what they care about, they will tell you. And so one of my colleagues says, don't talk about me without me. Don't talk about me without me. And again, this is radically different. Most organizational processes, there's the folks at the top that figure it out, the parents, the therapists, whoever we are that are the experts and the authorities, and we know best. Appreciative Inquiry says, sit down with all of the people whose future it is and let them have a voice at the table. If you're working in a school system, you've got to have the students in the room. If you're working in a health center, you've got to have some patients in the room. And so it's about including all of the people whose future it is into the conversation. Organizations, I think I do have it up there. Okay. And you're going to have an experience of this in a little while. We use the phrase improbable pairs. People who don't normally talk to one another. Maybe they ought to because their work overlaps, but for whatever reasons, they're not in conversation or communication. So we bring improbable pairs together. This happens to be Dalai Lama and an Native American elder that we're enjoying talking to each other. If you want to create change in an organization, change who talks to whom about what. Who talks to whom about what. So we change the topic of conversation, change who's in the room. Invite the whole system, all of the stakeholders into the conversation. And again, a little bit later today, I'll tell the story of an Appreciative Inquiry Summit that I did for Idaho State Department of Education on services for students who are deaf and blind. So yes, they were all in the room, and their parents, and their guide dogs, and interpreters, and braille recorders, and so forth and so on. And I'll tell you a story about that. So it's important to know that we need more and more to build bridges of conversation and include people. The Art of Illumination, bringing out the best of people and situations. Have any of you read Tojo, Thatch and Carey, and Cal Metzer's book on appreciative intelligence? It's a delightful book, and basically what they say is that all of us have the capacity to look and to see the implicitly positive in any situation, but we don't. We don't develop our appreciative eyes. We don't develop our appreciative vocabulary. So the Art of Illumination is the ability to bring out the best of people and situations. Peter Drucker, who now has been passed away for probably a couple of years, made the comment in an interview with David Cooperwriter that the task of leadership is to create an alignment of strengths for a purpose or a goal in such a way that weaknesses are irrelevant. Now, that again is common sense. All right? I have a nephew who played Little League baseball. He was a great runner. He was a great hitter. He was a great outfielder. He could throw the ball really, really far. So he played outfield. He hit home runs. He was a star. And his team went to the Little League World Series. And all of their pitchers got hurt or had already played their game. There's rules about when they can play. And so somebody had to pitch the last game. And my nephew was the one that was asked to pitch, and he wasn't a pitcher. And he still feels bad that he lost the game. He lost the whole championship for his team. It wasn't his strength. But somebody had to do it in that case. But coaches know to play people to their strengths. Human resource people, I'm really sorry if there's any HR managers and directors in the room, so I'll know who I'm about to, say something. Okay, apologies in advance. Most of our human resource practices follow a very different statement. They follow a statement that says, let's do an analysis of Diana's competencies. Let's find out where she is weakest, and let's develop her in her weakness. Right? Human resource development has been based on that assumption, whether it's personnel, employee relations, for altogether too long. Everything that we're learning about strengths is that strengths are near perfect performance in activity. They feel easy. They increase excellence, and this is all from Now Discover Your Strengths from Buckingham and Clifton. They provide a sense of joy, flow, and fulfillment. Okay, so but here's the really cool stuff. Outstanding performers are rarely well-rounded. Well, we're not well-rounded. Does that make anybody feel good? It makes me feel good, all right? We capitalize on our strengths. And we minimize our weaknesses. A lot of good ways of doing that. You work with somebody who's got a strength that complements yours. You find ways that you don't have to do the things that you're not good at. Each person's greatest room for growth is in his or her greatest area of strength. We have a lot of redesigning of HR systems, of practices in organizations, in agencies, to really bring this stuff to life. Because again, all of our institutions are designed on a different set of understandings about humanity. So the appreciative leadership practice is to be a strength spotter. And it's time for you to practice. Here's the inquiry. It's very simple. You're going to find a partner, someone in the room that you don't know, an improbable pair, right? So you're going to find a partner, someone you don't know. You're going to ask your partner the questions that I will flip back. You're going to ask your partner to tell you a success story. You're going to probe, you're going to listen, and as you listen, you're going to be trying to sense your partner's strengths. And by the way, you don't have to use the via strengths, the via strengths, or the strength. This is your own language, all right? What you find meaningful as your partner tells their story. Then you're going to reflect them back and reverse roles. You'll each have about 4 minutes, and I'm going to be the timer. Here are the questions. Tell me about a recent success, something you've done in the past few weeks or months that's given you great satisfaction and pride, something that was meaningful to you. And if you want it to be work, you can, or you can leave it open-ended. And you're going to ask your partner to talk about themselves, not the situation, but what did they do? What else did you do? What gave you the idea to do this? Who else was involved and how did you relate to them? Tell me more about what you did to make this a success. So your probes are really going to be probing into the active engagement of your partner in this situation. And as you do that, you're going to listen. Boy, she has a lot of courage. Wow, that took perseverance. Oh my goodness. And then you're going to reflect back. Based on your success story, I sense that some of your strengths are. Okay? So, everybody find an improbable partner, someone that you don't know, that you haven't yet met, and I'll tell you when to change roles. All right, we have a microphone available, and I'm going to ask you, how was that? And there's the microphone. So raise your hand if you'd like to share a comment about how this experience was. One up here.
My name's Donna, as we met earlier. Truly, that was a gift from someone that has not met me, but that in witnessing my story, honored the best of who I feel I want to be. And so it was truly a blessing to have that experience.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as you share, how did it feel? Did you enjoy being heard? Or did you enjoy getting the feedback? Did you enjoy listening? What about that was most meaningful for you? Yes, Donna's partner.
Therese. It was, it was so wonderful to feel appreciated more than just the cerebral sharing. It was an emotion. She just was with me on a heartfelt level, and that was really important to me, not to refute that our intellect was really important in what we shared, but it was so nice to feel the deeper level of meaning that was understood. Thank you.
Great. Other comments or reflections? This is not a room full of shy people. I know that. Okay, great.
I found it disconcerting to get a compliment. You know, we usually shoot them down.
Yes.
But it was a surprise that my partner unearthed some things which I hadn't thought of, and it was for me it was a very nice experience, giving a very pleasant person a few strokes.
Nice. Good. Yes, sometimes we do, put down any compliments that we might get. And yet we're hungry for them. We're hungry to be seen, to be known, to be reflected. Lovely. So another question, how could you imagine using that? That was 5 minutes each person. 5 minutes each person. How might you use that simple little strength spotting activity? Let's get some ideas. Yes, here we've got a couple right here.
Hi, I'm going to be teaching a university course in positive psychology this September, and I came here to the conference looking for things that I could have my students do in class. And this is something that I'll be having them do in class, and I won't have to lecture for 10 minutes in the process.
There you go. Good.
It'll be a lot more meaningful for me not to lecture, too.
So with students, okay, back in the back.
Let me just comment to the gentleman who's going to be using this in his positive psychology class, that actually one of the things you can do is have people tell the stories in groups and do a group strength spotting. And, so that and we actually do this in the class that we teach, where we have everybody tell a best self story and have the group practice strength spotting in a group. And that's also an interesting way to go about it.
Good. Let me respond to that from an appreciative inquiry perspective. You can do that. And one of the things that people in business say, I would use this to start my team, getting team members together. What we find is the one-on-one connection, doing something first in a one-on-one interview is very important because everyone gets heard. And then we often have the partner share the story. Not the casual, oh, let me introduce my partner, but let me tell you the story I just heard and the strengths. And what that also does, it then puts stories in the room, stories as your data point, and it also creates a sense of humility. Because when people are telling their own story, first of all, they're kind of trying to position, how much should I really tell? Is it safe? What should I do? And when you're in a one-on-one setting, you can kind of settle in a little bit easier. And then you bring the one-on-one into the circle. And then when we do large group works, then the circle comes into the whole room like this. So absolutely, yes. And I'd say explore, try it in lots of different ways. But I do encourage you, wherever possible, let people do interviews. I wonder what it would be like to have, people in therapy interviewing each other in front of you or something like that. I would get, and when I do my VIA, I think I'm pathologically creative, if that's a value or a strength. So always looking at different ways that we can do it. Great. Simple, narrative-based, and it's amazing what you learn. People often come away and a day later they'll go, I thought about what my partner said. Hadn't thought about myself that way. Now I have some new things to hang on to my identity. So the third set of practices is inspiration. And what we know from our experience is that all change, whether it's personal, organizational, community, requires large amounts of positive emotions, energy, enthusiasm, and hope. And one of my, we have lots of now nice definitions of hope popping up in the literature in positive psychology. And I just like, the believing in the best in the midst of the worst. Being able to see a positive possibility. And again, the old models of change say, if there's not a burning platform, if there's not something so horrible, we're never going to grow. Well, we have workshops that are completely strength-based, affirmative, and people make huge transformational changes. It is possible as people to grow and to learn and to move in new directions without having to hit the bottom. Now, I'm not saying that people aren't going to ever hit the bottom, because we all do, but change really needs positive emotions, hope, and enthusiasm. So this unleashing the creative spirit. And the what we know so much from positive psychology and a number of people who are studying the positivity ratio is that it makes a difference. Barbara Fredrickson's work, who is also now in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I'm going to be speaking with her class this coming semester. I mean, she really is showing us that there's a healthy range. 4-to-1 positive to negative communication, up to 11-to-1 positive to negative. And that if we're in that range, people flourish. Now, I don't know any organizations or families that are above 11-to-1. So lest we worry about being Pollyannas, we've got a long, long way to go. Most of them hang out in the, 1 positive to 2 or 3 or 4 negative criticism. And so that range, I think, is very meaningful. It also says, it's not 4-0. It says that, we've got to, every once in a while, there's something that just needs to be said. And you've got to find ways to say it. And that's where all of our great skills at framing things so that people can hear them and framing it so that it's going to be meaningful for them and they're going to want to take the message and learn is important. Marcel Losada and his team in Chile, successful teams, 5-to-1 positive. And very parallel with John and Julie Gutman's work, and I understand they're here in Seattle. And not here, I was in Seattle. Okay, I'm now in Vancouver. They're in Seattle. I've been traveling for 2 weeks, so when I go home tomorrow, it's going to be a long-awaited homecoming. And their information is that successful messages are 5-to-1. We actually have had a number of graduate students over the years go into organizations and go into the cafeteria and sit down with folks and say, tell me, where's the company going to be in 5 years? Just that sort of neutral, how's it going to be? And what we have found is that there is also a correlation of 5-to-1. Organizations that are doing well financially, where people are feeling satisfied at work, tend to have a 5-to-1. We actually were working in one healthcare system where it was 1 positive to 50 negative. I mean, they very soon after that were acquired and turned around because they were not only losing money, on the edge of losing patients. So the nature of conversation makes a difference. Not only do our words create a resonance and a sort of sensibility, but the meaning that they carry and the meaning that we make goes and again ripples out. And so it's important to begin to build our own language and vocabulary of hope and inspiration. And the final one of the 5 appreciative leadership strategies and practice sets is integrity. And we talk about it as a path because, on a good day, I could be misappreciation, but on a bad day, I'm over here. And so we all have our ups and downs. And very often you'll hear an appreciative inquiry question will say, we all have our ups and downs. Tell me about a time when you were at the top of your game. Or tell me about a time when. But what we really believe is if we look at, again, the root of the word integrity, it goes back, it's integral, it's whole, it's health, it's holy. And to say that we are on the path of integrity is to say that we care about the whole. We care about what is healthy. We care about what is holy. And that is a really important stance to take as a human being. This quote from Martin Luther King, make a career of humanity, and you will make a greater person of yourself, a greater nation of your country, and a finer world to live in. So it all does start with us. And you may have been wondering about my buddy here. So he's going to help me tell the last story that I want to share with you. And you may know this story. He's a wolf. And the story is about the elder grandfather. It's often attributed to the Cherokee Native Americans in the U.S. I don't know if that's the case. But the grandfather thought, it's finally time to tell my young grandson about life and about what it means to be a person. And so he says to the grandson, inside of every person, there are two wolves. One is a good wolf, and that good wolf is compassionate and loving and caring and gentle and accepting. And there's a bad wolf, and they're in battle, and the bad wolf is greedy and egotistical and mean and abusive. And the two wolves are inside of every one of us, and they're battling. The grandson listened, and he thought for a minute, and he said to his grandfather, "Which one wins?" And the grandfather said, "The one that you feed." And so it's an invitation for all of us to feed the good wolf, because it starts with our own way of thinking and our own way of communicating. And there's 3 very basic skills and practices. Do it now. Ask powerfully positive questions that invite people to think different and beyond what they imagined was possible. Be a strength spotter, whether it's 2 or 3 minutes at a time, or whether you engage a whole team or a whole organization, and cultivate your own appreciative vocabulary. Really, I actually sat down the other day and I went, if I wrote down the ABCs, could I think of an appreciative word for every letter? Try it. You'll find that some of them you come up with empty. So really work on your own vocabularies. Thank you very, very much.